Jason. I swirled my drink, watching the ice clink against the glass before looking up at Mark, my old work buddy. So yeah, that's my life now, I said, smirking. Coding all day, debugging nightmares at 2 a.m., and having deep existential crises over whether pineapple belongs on a pizza. With a quiet chuckle, Mark shakes his head in amusement. Man, I've missed this. He takes a sip of his drink. What happened to you? We used to grab lunch, complain about work, and now you've just disappeared. Disappeared? I raise an eyebrow. Nah, I just leveled up into full hermit mode. No more water cooler gossip, no pointless small talk. Just me, my code, and the comforting glow of my monitor. I tap my temple. Bliss. Well, except for those days when I have to drag myself to the office for a few meetings. Mark smirks. Yeah. The office is like 10 minutes from your apartment. You make it sound like a pilgrimage. I shrug. Maybe if there was a decent table tennis setup, I'd consider showing up more often. But since there isn't, I'm good for now. And your personal life? I let out a short laugh. What personal life? Mark gives me a look, the kind that says, come on man, humor me. Valentine's Day's on Friday, you know, he adds. I sigh dramatically. Alright, here's the grand update. Still single, still not looking, still perfectly content with my relationship with streaming services. I mean, who needs romance when you have a never-ending backlog of shows that require emotional commitment? You can't just watch feel-good comedies and call that your love life. Why not? They've got laughter, heartwarming moments, and sometimes a happy ending, just like real relationships. Mark shakes his head, laughing. Dude, you always had a way of making the most ridiculous arguments sound logical. Exactly, which is why I don't date. Relationships are just complicated algorithms that people pretend to understand, but really don't. It's all variables, unpredictable bugs, and way too many random glitches. Mark leans back, studying me. Any new hobbies? I think for a second. Does arguing with strangers on the internet count? Mark snorts. Depends. Are you still correcting people's grammar? Nah, I've evolved. I read romance. I admit, taking a sip of my drink. He raises an eyebrow. Not because I believe in all that grand love story stuff, but because it's fascinating. The plot holes, the way one misunderstanding could be solved with a single text. It's like debugging code, but with feelings. I smirk. So yeah, I read them, and then I discuss them. Mark laughs. So let me get this straight. Your free time consists of coding, watching shows, and picking apart romance novels? Pretty much. I lean back. And honestly, I like it that way. No unnecessary drama, no expectations. Just me, my work, and the comfort of my own space. Mark studies me for a moment, then smirks. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that. Maya. I stir my latte absent-mindedly, watching the foam swirl in lazy circles. The cafe is busy but cozy. I sigh, resting my chin on my hand. Work was the usual, solving problems that aren't mine, making people feel heard, and pretending I have my life together. Across from me, Lisa smirks as she lifts her cappuccino. Oh yes, the glamorous life of HR. You joke, but it's exhausting, I say, stretching my arms. People come to me with the weirdest problems. Today, someone wanted to file a complaint because their coworker chews too loudly. And another guy had a moral objection to the office birthday cake because it wasn't gluten-free. Lisa snorts. So basically, you're a therapist in business casual. Pretty much. I sip my drink, allowing the heat to seep into me. In the irony, I am great at fixing other people's problems, but my own life? Disaster. Lisa raises an eyebrow. Oh, what pressing disaster are we dealing with today? I hesitate. Is my writing... She blinks. Your writing? That's the crisis. Yes. I gestured dramatically to my notebook. I had planned to begin a new story tonight, but I don't know. I need inspiration. Lisa tilts her head. Inspiration for what exactly? For something fresh, something real. I sigh, flipping through blank pages. I don't want to just write another predictable love story. I want something that feels alive. Something that resonates rather than another tired trope. Lisa rests her chin on her hand, grinning. So, you want a real-life love story? I roll my eyes. I said inspiration, not a relationship. She chuckles. Are you sure about that? I give her a look. Absolutely. Real relationships are messy. They don't have perfect dialogue or grand gestures at just the right moment. They have weird silences and misunderstandings. And people who ghost you because they forgot to text back. Lisa shrugs. But isn't that what makes them interesting? I tap my pen against my notebook. Maybe, but I don't want interesting in my personal life. I want it on the page. Lisa leans back, thoughtful. So, what's the plan? Waiting around until inspiration decides to show up? I groan. I don't know. Maybe I'll go somewhere new. Change up my routine. Lisa claps her hands together. Yes, see? That's exactly what you need. A little spontaneity. You never know. You might just stumble upon the perfect story. Valentine's Day is just ahead, the ideal time for something unexpected to happen. I laugh. Right, because life totally works like that. But as I glance down at my empty page, A tiny part of me wonders, what if it does? Jason. I had just finished the book. Yes, a romantic one. On Valentine's Day, no less. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. It was exactly what I expected. Dramatic, unrealistic, and full of moments that made me question whether the characters had ever heard of basic communication. Still, I had to admit, it was entertaining in its own ridiculous way. Curious to see if anyone else had noticed the same absurdities, I opened a forum, a fresh cup of coffee on my side. I scrolled through the reviews. Most people were gushing about how beautiful and heartfelt it was. I smirked. Maybe it was time to join the discussion. I encountered a spirited defender of the book. She wasn't shy about expressing her adoration for every flowery word and sentimental moment in the novel. Naturally, I couldn't resist jumping in with my 2 cents. Really, if the protagonists had just taken a moment to communicate like actual human beings, the entire plot would have made sense. I typed, a smirk virtually present in every word. I peppered my argument with references to absurd scenarios from popular streaming shows. Something along the lines of, it's like they are living in a dystopian show where every emotional breakdown is sponsored by a plot hole. I thought my witty commentary would add just the right mix of humor and logic to my critique. To my surprise, she didn't take offense. Instead, she fired back with passion, defending the book's dreamy atmosphere. Maybe not every moment has to be logically dissected, she wrote. Not everything is meant to be broken down. Some things are just meant to be felt. For hours, our discussion evolved into this bizarre exchange of ideas. I laid down all my logical inconsistencies, comparing the storyline to poorly written code, while she countered with the beauty of flawed humanity, arguing that imperfection was what made the narrative so endearing. At one point, I quipped, "Your argument is as optimistic as a rom-com where the protagonist believes in happy endings despite every flaw in the system." She laughed in text, replying that my cynicism was exactly what needed fixing in a world that desperately needed a little more heart. We dove deep into every nuance of the book. The melodrama of the love letters, the inexplicable plot contrivances, and even the way the author used weather to mirror the characters' emotions. I was in my element, dissecting each point with the precision of a programmer debugging a flawed algorithm. At the same time, I admired her unwavering belief that there was something magical in the chaos of it all. Over time, our talk shifted into something more playful, almost flirtatious. We were no longer adversaries. We were like 2 people trading witty banter over our vastly different perspectives on love and logic. Yet, just as our exchange reached its peak, she posed a thoughtful query about whether love could ever be fully understood through reason alone. I was exhausted. I had spent hours lost in the labyrinth of online commentary, and the pull of sleep was too strong to ignore. And with the added joy of having to drag myself to the office tomorrow, I had no excuse to stay up any longer. I logged off, leaving her question hanging in the digital air. I didn't even think about it as I drifted off to sleep. Just another unresolved bug in an otherwise entertaining conversation. Maya. I closed the book with a soft sigh, hugging it against my chest for a moment before setting it down. My heart was still warm from the story, the last lingering emotions settling like the afterglow of a perfect sunset. It wasn't that the book was flawless. Of course it wasn't. The plot had its quirks. The characters made frustrating choices. And sure, if you really wanted to, you could dissect it all and point out every flaw. But why would you? For me, romance wasn't about making sense. It was about what you felt. About the way a good love story could make your heart flutter. The way it could transport you somewhere soft and hopeful, even just for a little while. Some people wanted airtight realism in books, but I wanted magic. That kind of connection you can't put into words, but know in your bones. Still lost in the mood the book left me in, I grabbed my laptop and opened the book discussion forum, eager to see what others thought. Scrolling through the thread, I smiled at all the glowing reviews. People talking about how deeply they connected to the story. How it made them believe in love again. Exactly, I thought. That's what stories like this are for. Feeling inspired, I typed out my own review, pouring my heart into it. Passionate about the story, I eagerly shared my love for its heartfelt moments and dreamy prose, unapologetically embracing every bit of its romantic charm. I wrote about the way the story made me feel, about how love didn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. I hit send, satisfied. After some time, I noticed a response. A man had responded to my review, picking apart my words with an almost infuriating precision. His comment was laced with sarcasm, questioning the book's believability and pointing out its logical inconsistencies. I didn't know who he was, of course, just a username, a sarcastic presence in a sea of sentimentality. But oh, he was relentless. He had written an entire breakdown of the book's so-called flaws. How some moments were so improbable they bordered on fantasy. His comments were sharp, laced with dry humor, as if he was having the time of his life picking everything apart. I usually wouldn't have given it a second thought, but something about his words made me pause. It wasn't just that he was being critical. Plenty of people were. It was the way he did it, as if he genuinely believed that romance could be reduced to logic, that if it didn't make perfect sense, it wasn't real. I couldn't let that slide. I typed my response, defending the book the way I would defend any love story. I told him that not everything had to be analyzed like an equation, that sometimes what made a story beautiful was its imperfections. Love wasn't a science experiment with predictable results. It was messy, uncertain, full of contradictions. And that was what made it real. To my surprise, he responded immediately, challenging me, pushing back with his sarcastic quips and quick logic. But I held my ground. What started as a debate turned into something else entirely. An exchange of ideas, a battle between head and heart. And strangely, I enjoyed it. There was something about the way he argued that made me want to prove my point. He wasn't cruel or dismissive, just analytical, methodical, like he saw the world in equations and wanted everything to fit. It was almost endearing in a frustrating kind of way. We went back and forth for hours, our opinions clashing and aligning in turns. Sometimes he made me laugh. His humor was dry, unexpected, and annoyingly clever. Other times he left me shaking my head, half amused, half exasperated. But beneath all the debating, I felt something else. A curiosity, a pull, like even though we saw the world differently, there was something in the way our words clashed that made the conversation feel alive. And then, as the conversation began to slow, I hesitated before typing one final question. Do you think love can really be understood through reason alone? It was the heart of our entire argument, wrapped up in one sentence. The one thing I really wanted to know. I hit send and waited. And waited. Time slipped by, minutes turning to an hour, then another. My heart sank just a little. Had I said too much? Or maybe he had just lost interest. Or maybe he just couldn't find the right words. I sighed, closing my laptop. Maybe he'd respond in the morning. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, something told me I wouldn't be forgetting this talk anytime soon. Jason. I was making my way home, wandering a bit after a brief but necessary trip to the office. The city buzzed with its usual Saturday afternoon energy. Tourists walking too slow in the middle of the sidewalk, restaurants filling up, and the hum of weekend freedom in the air. Then I saw the sign. Open Gallery Day, free entry. With no pressing plans, I figured, why not? If nothing else, it seemed like a worthwhile distraction, maybe even refreshing. Inside, the gallery had that hushed, almost sacred atmosphere that made even the slightest sound feel magnified. A few people wandered between the exhibits, murmuring in appreciation, heads tilted at thoughtful angles. Others stood in small clusters, discussing the meaning of various paintings as if the fate of the world depended on it. I moved through the space, hands in my pockets, scanning the artwork. Some pieces were abstract, all wild colors and chaotic brushstrokes. Others were hyper-realistic, almost eerily detailed. I could appreciate the skill, but nothing really grabbed me until I saw that painting. A wide open meadow stretched across the canvas, its grasses kissed by the fading sunlight. Sheep lay scattered across the grass, their woolly forms nestled into the earth, their eyes half closed in that lazy, drowsy way that came with the end of a warm day. The whole scene had a soft, dreamlike quality. I stepped closer. It was simple, almost deceptively so, but the details kept me staring. The way the light kissed the edges of the clouds, the subtle brushstrokes suggesting a breeze that only the artist could feel. It wasn't just a painting of sheep in a field. It was a feeling, a moment suspended between wakefulness and sleep, between reality and something more ethereal. I heard voices behind me, two women chatting, their tones warm and animated. They were standing near a different piece, talking about the artist's use of light and shadow. Their conversation faded into the background as I turned back to the painting. What was it about this that held my attention? Maybe it was the contrast. The peaceful stillness of this scene against the relentless noise of real life. The way it made me think of quiet moments, of existing without expectation or urgency. Or maybe it was something else, something I couldn't quite put into words. I exhaled, shifting my weight. I wasn't one to lose myself in paintings, but here I was. And for some reason, I didn't feel like leaving just yet. Maya. I hadn't planned to spend my Saturday afternoon in an art gallery, but here I was, trailing behind my two work friends as they eagerly moved from one painting to the next, their voices full of excitement. "Look at this one," Charlotte gasped, grabbing my arm. "Doesn't it feel like a memory? Like something from childhood?" I tilted my head at the canvas, a collection of blurred figures in a golden-lit park, soft edges making it look more like a dream than reality. I said thoughtfully, because I didn't quite feel what she did, but I wanted to. I love it," Sarah added, pressing her hands together. "Somehow it makes me miss something I never even experienced." I smiled, watching the way they reacted to the art. How effortlessly they connected with it. That was the thing about galleries. Some people could step into a painting and instantly feel something. I admired that, even if I wasn't sure I experienced it the same way. I had agreed to come today mostly because I wanted inspiration. My last attempt at a romance story had stalled, and I thought maybe wandering through an art gallery, soaking in the creativity around me, might spark something new. But so far, nothing had grabbed me. Still, I played along. I asked questions and tried to see what my friends saw. But if I were being honest, I was a bit distracted. My mind kept drifting back to the story I wanted to write, to the challenge of capturing emotions in words. Love, longing, connection. How did you translate something so intangible onto a page? Maya, what about this one? Sarah asked, pulling me toward another painting. What does this make you feel? I looked at it. A stormy ocean, waves crashing wildly against jagged cliffs. I let my eyes trace the sharp, dark lines. The movement captured in the brushstrokes, chaos. It feels restless, I said finally. Sarah nodded approvingly. Yes, that's exactly it. We moved on. My friends caught up in another discussion about color and symbolism, but I let my gaze wander. That was when I saw him. A tall man, standing alone in front of a painting. Something about him stood out. Maybe it was his posture. The way he was completely still, hands tucked into his pockets. Or maybe it was how long he'd been staring at the same canvas, as if trying to unravel some deep mystery hidden within it. I studied him for a moment. He was well dressed, white shirt, sleeves casually rolled up. Not quite the usual gallery visitor. He didn't have the air of an artist, nor did he seem like someone just here to pass time. He was focused, absorbed. Was he the artist? The owner of the gallery? Or just someone who had found something in that painting the rest of us had missed? Curiosity sparked inside me. Finally, something interesting. The afternoon had been pleasant, but uninspiring. Until now. Something about him, about this very moment, felt different. Unexpected, like the beginning of a story I hadn't realized I was looking for. Maybe, just maybe, I had just found the spark I needed for my next romantic story. What was it about that painting that held his attention? Was he admiring the technique, or was there something more? A story behind it, a connection only he understood. A dozen more questions swirled through my mind, but one stood out above the rest. Would I dare to ask him? Jason and Maya. I was still staring at the painting when a voice, warm and curious, pulled me from my thoughts. You've been looking at this for a while now, she said. I've got to know, what's so interesting about it? I turned my head slightly and saw her standing next to me. A woman in a light blue summer dress, effortlessly elegant yet relaxed, with a friendly expression that made it clear she wasn't just making small talk. She genuinely wanted to know. There was something undeniably gentle about her, an unspoken warmth in the way she carried herself, as if kindness was second nature to her. Her long blonde curls tumbled over her shoulders, catching the soft gallery light, almost weightless. And then there were her eyes. They were impossibly blue, deep, endless, like the ocean at dawn when the sky and water blurred together in quiet harmony. But it wasn't just their color that struck me. It was the way they held a quiet storm beneath the surface, a searching quality, as if she wasn't just looking at me, but looking into me. It was unsettling and mesmerizing all at once. Not forceful, not demanding, just there, waiting, patient. I felt the pull of them, like gravity, like the gentle tug of waves drawing me towards something unknown. I didn't answer right away. I was still caught in the moment, still trying to make sense of the way everything about her presence, her eyes, the way she had stepped into this moment so effortlessly, made the whole world feel slightly unreal. I smiled just a little. I guess I got lost in it. She tilted her head expectantly. I exhaled, glancing back at the painting. It reminds me of something. I wasn't sure why I said that. Maybe because it was true. Maybe because she seemed genuinely open to hearing me out. She didn't rush me. So after a beat, I kept going. When I was a kid, I used to spend summers at my grandparents' farm. No responsibilities, no deadlines, just long, golden afternoons, where time didn't seem to move at all. With a small gesture to the artwork, I said, "This? It reminds me of that feeling. The sun's heat lingering on your skin, the familiar scent of grass underfoot, the way everything slows down in the late afternoon. And all you can hear is the hum of insects and the occasional bleat of a lazy sheep." She said nothing, just watching me as I spoke. I let my eyes drift over the details again. The soft edges, the gentle blur between colors, the way everything in the painting seemed to exhale, as if even the world itself was winding down for the night. "I used to lie in the fields just like that," I murmured, almost to myself, feeling the earth beneath me, the warmth of the day lingering, even as the sun started to set. It was the kind of quiet that wraps around you. No noise, no thoughts, just being. The words came slower now, quieter. Back then, everything felt so simple. You never noticed time passing. You didn't wonder if you were wasting it. You just lived. The woman beside me didn't interrupt. She let the silence settle between us like soft dust in the air. A quick blink snapped me back to reality. Now, I have the small laugh. Now, I analyze things, break them down. I look for patterns, explanations. I guess it comes with the job. Spending all day writing code, fixing bugs, making sure every line makes sense. At some point, I started treating life the same way. If something doesn't add up logically, I question it. My gaze lingered on the sleepy sheep in the painting. Maybe that's why this caught my attention. It's the opposite of all that. It's not trying to be anything complicated. It just is. I paused. Then finally she spoke. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "The way you put it, I can almost picture myself there." Her voice had a gentle bedtime story quality to it, like she understood the rhythm of quiet moments. I glanced at her, curious now. "And what do you see in it?" She smiled. "Dreams." I raised an eyebrow, and she laughed lightly. "I mean it. The way the colors blur, the way the whole scene feels suspended in time. It's like that moment between wakefulness and sleep, when everything is warm and safe, and your thoughts start floating instead of making sense." I consider that, like when you're drifting off and the real world starts blending with imagination. Exactly. I let that settle. Maybe that was another reason I liked the painting. It reminded me of a time when I could dream without dissecting every detail. For a while, we just stood there, looking at the canvas. Neither of us seemed in a hurry to break the spell. And for the first time in a long while, I let my mind rest. Our conversation flowed easily, shifting between art, memories, and the nature of dreams. We agreed on the way the painting carried a sense of nostalgia, how its soft edges seemed to blur the line between reality and imagination. But we disagreed too, on the details, the technicalities. I thought the artist had intentionally left things ambiguous, open to interpretation, while she believed the painting was meant to evoke something specific, something deeply personal to anyone who looked at it. "Art isn't about making sense," she said with a smile. "It's about feeling something." I smirked. "You sound like one of those reviews I argued with last night. Feeling is trying to outmatch reasoning." She let out a small laugh, then paused. A flicker of realization crossed her face, her brows drawing together just slightly. "No way." I frowned. "What?" She blinked. I was in a discussion last night about a romance book. A very long discussion. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. So was I. Her expression shifted again, like puzzle pieces snapping into place. I watched as realization dawned, the way her breath hitched just slightly. I arched an eyebrow. "You've gotta be kidding me." Her fingers hovered near her mouth before she let them fall. "This is insane," she muttered. Things like this only happen in romantic novels." I chuckled. Well, you'd know all about that. She shook her head, still trying to process it. I can't believe it. Then after a pause, her voice softened. I asked you a question at the end of that discussion. I knew immediately what she meant. Her final question had lingered in my mind even after I had closed the laptop, even as I drifted off to sleep. Do you think love can really be understood through reason alone? I shrugged, a smirk playing on my lips. I needed sleep. Besides, I figured you'd already made up your mind about the answer. She narrowed her eyes. That's not the real answer. I didn't respond, just let the silence stretch between us. There was something unreadable in her gaze, something that flickered between disbelief and something deeper. What was she hoping to find? A sign? An answer? Behind the curiosity, I caught something else. A hesitancy. A flicker of vulnerability. As if she was bracing for the moment I might dismiss all of this as meaningless. And beneath that, layered between unspoken words, was something terrifyingly genuine. I swallowed. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just observing emotions from a safe clinical distance. I was feeling them. The quiet pull of the moment. The weight of her gaze. The unsettling realization that maybe some things weren't meant to be analyzed. I cleared my throat. Anyway, I only stopped by for a moment. That'll be it for now. I turned slightly, signaling the conversation was over. Maybe, she started, hesitating for half a second before continuing. Maybe we could finish the discussion sometime. Over coffee or something? I exhaled through my nose, amused. I don't date. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her face shifted through a dozen different emotions in the span of a second. Surprise, confusion, something close to disappointment. Then, just like that, she smoothed her expression. I gave a small nod, slid my hands into my pockets, and walked off without another word. Jason. The soft hum of my laptop filled the quiet of my apartment as I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. It was late, again. Another long night of debugging. Another few hours lost in lines of code that blurred together the moment I stopped thinking about them. I exhaled, shutting the screen and grabbing my earbuds. I scrolled through my playlist, settling on one of my usual bedtime story podcasts, Bedtime Experience on YouTube. A voice began telling a tale of future times when people couldn't live without their sleeping watches, but my mind drifted elsewhere. I found myself lost in thoughts of her, the woman from the gallery. I couldn't shake the image of her calm, warm eyes, a deep, inviting blue that seemed to hold secrets and kindness in equal measure. There was something mesmerizing about the way she looked at the world, as if she could see the poetry hidden in every mundane detail. Her demeanor was gentle yet confident, an unspoken promise of understanding and compassion that left me both comforted and intrigued. At that moment, standing before that painting of a sun-drenched meadow with sleepy sheep scattered across the grass, felt unreal. A scene lifted from a dream. It was as though time itself had bent to create a perfect intersection of our lives. A fleeting alignment of fate and chance. How? The question latched onto my thoughts, refusing to let go. How had it happened? This collision of two separate lives, crossing in ways that felt too precise to be accidental. Was it truly just chance? A random intersection of two wandering paths? Or was there something else at play? The idea of fate had always seemed irrational to me. An easy explanation for events people couldn't otherwise make sense of. But standing in that gallery, watching her eyes widen with recognition, hearing her voice echo the same words I had debated over just the night before, it defied logic. I wasn't the type to believe in cosmic forces or grand designs, and yet I played through every possibility. Probability, coincidence, sheer statistical inevitability. The world was vast, but not infinite. Maybe she had always been someone hovering at the edges of my world, a stranger I had unknowingly passed by a dozen times before, only now stepping into focus. Maybe if I retraced every step, every decision that led me to that gallery at that exact moment, I could map out a clear, logical sequence, an answer. However, the more I tried to understand it, the more impossible it seemed. So I stopped thinking about how. I started thinking about why. Why had it happened? Why did it matter so much? Why did it feel less like an accident and more like something inevitable? How had led me in circles, a futile search for an answer that refused to reveal itself. But why? Why made my pulse quicken, made something restless stir in my chest? Because despite all my careful reasoning, all my years of trusting in logic and predictability, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something had shifted, that something had begun the moment I saw her, that maybe some unseen force had nudged us toward each other, not because of probability, but because we were meant to meet. Was it possible that some things, like the spark of connection, the inexplicable pull of fate, were simply beyond the realm of reason? Was love one of those mysteries that no amount of logic could ever solve? And wasn't that possibility, the why, infinitely more important than the how? Inside me, a seed of something profound was stirring, pushing against the constraints of my meticulously ordered thoughts. I felt an unfamiliar tension, a mix of wonder, longing, and the sweet thrill of realizing that life might just be more than a series of predictable, manageable tasks. In that moment, I wondered if perhaps there was something more out of our control, something that transcended code and calculations. What if this chance meeting was the beginning of something extraordinary? I was caught between the certainty of my logical world and the enchanting possibility of a more mysterious, chaotic one. A world where emotions ruled over reason, where every heartbeat might be the prelude to a beautiful, unscripted story. The contrast was stark. The clinical clarity of my day-to-day existence against the warm, hazy promise of connection that her presence had ignited within me. Every thought of her seemed to break through my carefully constructed barriers, urging me to embrace uncertainty, to allow for the possibility that not everything needed to be understood. Maybe I was thinking too much. Before I could stop myself, I reopened my laptop. The forum. The book discussion. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe just curiosity. Maybe something else entirely. But then I saw it. A new comment. Her comment. Logic can analyze a story, but can it ever predict where the plot truly leads? Maybe the best stories begin where fiction and reality blur. It wasn't a direct reply, not really. Just a vague, cryptic message tucked into the thread, meaningless to anyone else. But I knew. It was meant for me. Maya. The soft glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the room, casting a faint halo around me as I sat curled up in bed, fingers poised over the keyboard. Outside, the city hummed in the distance, cars slipping through empty streets, the occasional murmur of a night owl passing by. But inside my little world, everything was still. I exhaled slowly, my thoughts looping back to him. The way he had looked at that painting, as if the past had unfolded before his eyes. Something distant and untouchable coming alive just for a moment. And then his goodbye. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then pressed down. I started typing. The sheep stretched lazily across the golden meadow, their wool tinged with the last kiss of sunlight. Shadows stretched long, softening the edges of the world, blurring the line between waking and something gentler, something like a memory, something like a dream. A warm breeze sighed through the grass, carrying whispers of stories long forgotten. The sky above melted into shades of rose and violet, a watercolor haze where stars blinked awake one by one. The world was settling, exhaling, waiting. And so was she. She stood at the edge of the meadow, her dress brushing against the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, the low murmur of a stream curled through the landscape, a lullaby of water meeting stone. carrying with it the echoes of whispered confessions and untold promises. She wasn't alone. A figure lingered on her side, quiet but present. The kind of presence that didn't need words to be known. He had always been like this, an observer, a questioner, a man who searched for meaning in things others simply felt. "Tell me," she said softly, "do you think dreams ever remember us?" His gaze didn't shift from the horizon. "Maybe," he murmured. "Maybe they wait for us, just like this." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile woven from nostalgia, something she had held onto without realizing, the kind that made her wonder if time could ever truly fold back on itself, if moments like this could be relived, rewritten, undone. I stared at the screen, blinking slowly. The quiet of my room wrapped around me, heavy and warm. My own story had lulled me into stillness, the kind that my limbs feel slow, my thoughts hazy. I glanced at the time, and then, before I could stop myself, I opened the forum. My heart thrummed as I typed out the message, my fingers moving on instinct, as if my thoughts had already decided before I had. The words I left behind weren't obvious, not to anyone else, but they would be to him. I hesitated only a moment before pressing send, then returned to my story. "How long do you think we have?" The man next to her breathed out, slow and measured, as if rethinking the question. "Until the sun disappears," he said, tilting his head toward the horizon. She turned to look at him then, searching his face in the golden light, memorizing the way the shadows softened against his cheek, the way his gaze never wavered from the horizon, even as the world grew dimmer. "And if we could stop time?" she pressed, something wistful curling around the edges of her words. At that, he finally turned to her, his mouth hinting at a secretive smile. "Then we'd be trapped in a dream." She smiled too, though hers was tinged with something else, something unspoken. Would that be such a bad thing? For a moment he didn't answer. He only watched her, his gaze unreadable, as though debating whether to speak the truth. And then he whispered, "No, maybe that's exactly where we're meant to be." She wanted to say something else, but the world around them was slipping further into slumber, the sky deepening, the air thickening with the weight of night, and perhaps in the softness of it all, words were unnecessary. So she let them go. I let the scene linger for a moment, the weight of their words settling into the story like footprints in the grass. Then, finally, I pulled my hands away from the keyboard. Closing my laptop halfway, I let my head rest back against the pillow. My eyelids fluttered shut. I exhaled slowly, letting my body sink deeper into the warmth of my bed. Sleep was close, tugging at the edges of my thoughts, lulling me into the space between dreaming and waking. But something kept me from surrendering completely. A soft restlessness stirred in my chest, delicate but insistent. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. My fingers twitched, and before I could second-guess myself, I reached for my laptop, tilting the screen back open. Just one last check. Just a quick glance, nothing more. The forum loaded sluggishly, the familiar thread glowing in the dim light of my room. My heart gave a little flutter, foolish, absurd, before I even saw it. But then, there it was. A reply. His reply. I sat up straighter, pulse quickening. My eyes traced the words once, twice, drinking them in. It was short, deliberately so, a puzzle only meant for me to solve. Blurred lines make for the most interesting narratives, and I've heard that some of them lead to excellent coffee. He understood. He understood.